Tonight, we're diving into a story that has shaken the internet to its core, not because it's flashy gossip or surface-level drama, but because of how painfully human it is. This is a story about love that slowly unraveled, about trust that was quietly broken, and about emotional wounds that were hidden behind smiles, silence, and carefully curated public appearances for far too long. Jaguar Wright has finally spoken out about her divorce from Todd, and what she revealed has left fans stunned, heartbroken, and questioning everything they thought they knew. For years, many believed their split was quiet, uneventful, and mutual, just another relationship that ran its course. But according to Jaguar, that couldn't be further from the truth. What she describes is a deeply emotional journey marked by betrayal, manipulation, and a level of heartbreak that doesn't fade just because papers are signed or time passes. This isn't a story you simply listen to, it's a story you feel. Every word, every pause, every revelation hits like lightning, leaving you emotionally raw and unable to look away. By the end of this video, you may find yourself questioning the nature of trust, reflecting on relationships in your own life, and feeling the weight of emotional pain that so many endure silently. This is not gossip. This is one woman's truth, uncovered, exposed, and impossible to ignore. When Jaguar Wright first stepped into the spotlight, she quickly became known for her fierce honesty and unapologetic voice. She never fit neatly into boxes, never softened her truth to make others comfortable, and never pretended to be someone she wasn't. That raw authenticity earned her admiration and controversy, but it also made one thing clear. When Jaguar speaks, she means every word. Over the years, fans have come to expect boldness from her, but nothing could have prepared them for the emotional storm she unleashed when she began speaking about her marriage and divorce from Todd. Behind the glitz, the smiles, and the illusion of stability, Jaguar says there was a reality that few people ever saw, one filled with emotional weight, broken promises, and years of silent suffering. For a long time, she stayed quiet. She carried the pain privately while the public moved on, unaware of what she says was happening behind closed doors. But eventually, that silence became too heavy, and when Jaguar finally decided to speak, she didn't hold back. According to Jaguar, the end of her marriage was not simply about two people growing apart. It wasn't a clean break or a peaceful decision made with mutual understanding. Instead, she describes it as the painful collapse of trust, a slow, devastating unraveling marked by betrayal, emotional manipulation, and choices that shattered the foundation of their relationship. Fans who once viewed Todd as charming, calm, and supportive were left stunned as Jaguar shared her side of the story. She described moments of deep loneliness, nights spent crying alone, and the crushing feeling of being invisible to the person she trusted most. While Todd's public image remained intact, Jaguar says she was left carrying emotional wounds that no one could see, wounds that didn't heal just because the relationship ended. That contrast between public perception and private reality is what made her revelations hit so hard. It's one thing to end a marriage, it's another to feel erased, unheard, and emotionally abandoned while the world continues to see a polished version of the person who hurt you. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of Jaguar's story is the emotional isolation she describes experiencing even while still married. She spoke about feeling alone despite sharing a life with someone, about conversations that went nowhere, and about emotional needs that were consistently ignored or dismissed. She described lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations in her mind, and wondering how things had gone so wrong. That kind of loneliness, the kind you feel when you're not physically alone but emotionally disconnected, is often the most painful, and it's something so many people watching recognized instantly. Jaguar says the silence hurt more than the arguments. The absence of emotional presence weighed heavier than any harsh words. And over time, that absence eroded her sense of security, self-worth, and trust. As Jaguar continued to open up, she described what she believes was emotional manipulation happening behind the scenes. According to Jaguar, Todd allegedly presented himself to the world calm, reasonable, sympathetic, while privately making choices that caused deep emotional harm. She spoke about broken promises, shifting narratives, and moments where she felt gaslit into questioning her own reality. That subtle, ongoing manipulation, she says, was far more damaging than a single explosive moment, because it slowly wore her down, leaving her doubting herself and her own instincts. Fans were horrified by the contrast she described between the public persona and the private behavior. Social media quickly filled with comments expressing disbelief, outrage, and deep empathy. Many said it felt like watching a nightmare unfold in real time, not just for Jaguar, but for anyone who has ever loved someone who didn't protect their heart. Another devastating part of Jaguar's account is how the public narrative unfolded during the divorce. She claims that while she was processing heartbreak privately, a different story was quietly circulating, one that left her feeling powerless, unheard, and misrepresented. She described watching false assumptions spread while feeling unable to speak her truth without being judged or dismissed. That kind of emotional trap, knowing the truth but feeling silenced by perception, is incredibly damaging, and according to Jaguar, it left scars that lingered long after the legal proceedings ended. Fans reacted strongly to this part of her story, expressing frustration at how often public perception overshadows private pain, especially when power dynamics and image control come into play. Jaguar made it clear that the divorce itself did not mark the end of her suffering. In many ways, she says, it was just the beginning. Even after the paperwork was finalized, the emotional wounds remained, resurfacing through memories, interactions, and reminders of what was lost. She spoke about the exhaustion of carrying grief that doesn't have a clear ending, about healing while still being triggered by the past, and about learning how to exist again without the life she once envisioned. This part of her story resonated deeply with viewers, many of whom shared that heartbreak doesn't follow timelines. It lingers, it resurfaces, and it demands to be felt before it can be released. One of the most raw moments in Jaguar's revelations came when she spoke about questioning herself. She admitted to wondering what she did wrong, why she wasn't enough, and how she ended up in a situation that left her feeling so small. That vulnerability, that willingness to admit self-doubt, made her story painfully relatable. It wasn't about blame, it was about confronting the emotional aftermath of loving deeply and losing painfully. But within that vulnerability was also the beginning of something powerful. Amid the heartbreak, Jaguar also shared moments of clarity and strength. She spoke about the slow process of rediscovering herself, rebuilding trust in her own instincts, and reclaiming her voice after years of silence. She emphasized that speaking out wasn't about revenge, it was about survival, about refusing to let pain define her future, about telling her story so that others might feel less alone in theirs. This shift from devastation to empowerment added depth to her narrative, transforming it from tragedy into testimony. However, according to legal experts, anytime a prenuptial agreement is signed days or even hours before a wedding, it creates a legal opening. That opening allows the signing party to later argue that they were under duress, undue pressure, or emotional stress when they signed the document. And the closer the signing is to the wedding date, the stronger that argument becomes. Now, we don't know the exact date Candy gave Todd the prenup, but based on what we saw on camera, it appears he had plenty of time to review it. He didn't receive it at the last minute. He had time to negotiate. He had time to push back. He had time to ask for changes. And yet, despite all that time, he waited. Todd didn't sign the prenup weeks in advance. He didn't sign it calmly after negotiations were done. He waited until hours before the wedding, and legally speaking, that timing is everything. If you remember the wedding footage, Todd asked Candy to change at least 2 things in the prenup. After back-and-forth discussions, she eventually agreed to those changes. And then, literally the night before the wedding, Todd signed. That matters more than people realize. Because from a legal standpoint, Todd can now argue that the prenup was signed under emotional pressure. Weddings are already emotionally charged events. Add family expectations, public scrutiny, cameras, and the pressure of not wanting to cancel a wedding, and you've got the perfect setup for a duress argument. Whether Todd intended this from the beginning or not, the end result is the same. The timing works in his favor. Another major point legal experts highlighted is the issue of coercion. Under Georgia law, a prenuptial agreement must include full financial disclosure, voluntariness, and the absence of coercion. Todd would need to prove that one of those elements was missing when he signed, and this is where the wedding footage becomes incredibly important. Legal experts specifically mentioned that if footage shows Candy or her family exerting pressure, setting last-minute deadlines, or presenting the prenup under emotionally charged circumstances, Todd's argument becomes much stronger. And that's exactly why Todd's legal team reportedly wants access to unaired footage from the wedding special. Because, let's be honest, reality TV doesn't show everything, and if there were moments behind the scenes where Todd felt pressured, rushed, or emotionally cornered, that footage could change everything. Now, this is where things get really interesting. Claudia Jordan brought up something on Carlos King's podcast that a lot of people glossed over when the wedding originally aired. She reminded viewers of a moment right before Todd signed the prenup, a moment that should have raised alarms. Todd was on camera stating that he wasn't being coerced and wasn't under duress, but immediately before signing, he casually said something along the lines of, "I'm going to go ahead and sign this against my attorney's advice." Let that sink in. Here's a man saying on camera that his own lawyer advised him not to sign, yet he signed anyway, hours before his wedding. From a legal perspective, that's massive. That single statement introduces doubt, it opens loopholes, it gives his legal team room to argue that he knew the agreement was unfavorable but felt pressured to proceed anyway. And that's why I say Todd was creating legal leverage before he walked down the aisle. Now, listen, I know this may be an unpopular opinion, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think Candy bears some responsibility here. Candy has openly said that Todd cares about money, even though he claims he doesn't. She has acknowledged that his attorney was constantly negotiating for more in the prenup. That alone should have told her everything she needed to know. Candy Burris is worth around $30 million. That is not regular money, that is generational wealth. And expecting someone to marry you and genuinely not care about money at all is unrealistic. That's not how human nature works. You cannot expect someone to act above human nature. And this is where I feel Candy was emotionally foolish, not financially foolish, but emotionally naive. You cannot be non-traditional when it comes to wealth dynamics and then expect traditional behavior. You can't be worth tens of millions of dollars, marry someone who earns significantly less, and honestly believe money will never become an issue. It doesn't work that way. Another thing people don't like to talk about is the stay-at-home parent dynamic. Todd stayed home while Candy worked. That alone shifts power, resentment, and expectations. You can't expect a man to be financially dependent on a woman worth $30 million and not care about money. That expectation alone is unrealistic. Candy wanted marriage, kids, and independence, and I get that, but I don't think you can have your cake and eat it too. There are trade-offs to every life decision. Legal experts also pointed out that simply having legal counsel isn't always enough to save a prenup. If an agreement is lopsided, deprives one spouse of significant marital wealth, and that spouse was unaware of what they were giving up, especially while the other party had attorneys present, the agreement becomes vulnerable. And we saw on camera that Candy had her attorneys present, while Todd did not. Not only that, he openly said he was going against his attorney's advice. That combination of imbalance, timing, and representation is why legal experts believe Todd has a real shot. Now, let's talk about Todd's social media activity, because this part is subtle but very telling. Todd posted a video of Candy working on Broadway, and keep in mind, he has already suggested that if things don't go his way, he may pursue full custody, arguing that Candy works too much. So why post her working out of town? The caption was positive, "Great job, keep inspiring." But from a legal standpoint, that post highlights exactly what he's claiming, that Candy is frequently away for work. And Candy responded with a heart emoji. To me, that suggests she's not fully seeing what's happening. She's not reading between the lines. Despite her intelligence and success, when it comes to love and relationships, there's a part of Candy that is emotionally blind. This brings us to Ebony K. Williams, who explained on Carlos King's podcast why she chose to become a single mother by choice using a donor. Ebony said she knew her professional life could put her in the exact same position Candy is in now, potentially having to stand in front of a judge and justify why she deserves custody of her own child, simply because she works. She wasn't willing to take that risk. Her perspective is powerful, honest, and necessary, especially for women with demanding careers. This also reminds me of Kenya Moore. Kenya wanted to use a sperm donor, and that would have been groundbreaking to see on Real Housewives of Atlanta. But instead, she married Mark Daly, who, by her own account, is barely present in their daughter's life. What makes this story so impactful isn't just who's involved, it's the emotional truth behind it, the silent suffering, the confusion, the betrayal, the healing. Fans didn't just watch Jaguar Wright's story, they saw themselves in it, and that's why it went viral. Because at its core, this isn't about celebrity drama, it's about the human cost of broken trust. Now that you've heard Jaguar Wright's story, it's impossible not to feel its weight. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the resilience, it all lingers long after the words stop. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of your own pain, your own healing, or your own journey, know that you're not alone. Millions of people connected to this story for that exact reason. This isn't just about the past, it's about moving forward, about truth, about strength. We want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Jaguar's revelations? Did her story shock you, move you, or inspire you? Drop your comments below and join the conversation. And if you want to stay updated on powerful stories, emotional truths, and viral moments shaking the internet, subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us. Because some stories aren't meant to be ignored, they're meant to be felt.